Hello friends, welcome to ML with AP. Today we are going to discuss iterators, comprehensions and generators. These are three very important concepts when it comes to core Python, and today we are going to discuss it in detail. So hang on and let's start. Let's start first with iterator. Unless we understand iterators, we are not going to understand comprehensions and generators, because iterators are the building blocks on which comprehensions and generators are standing. So what are iterators? I have already discussed this in some detail in my previous videos also, but let's go over it one more time to make it very clear. Now friends, iterators, as in the English word suggests, it is something which is iterate over. Iterate over means loop over. So it is a type of an object or a category of object which is used in Python to iterate over or loop over, right? So friends, if you recall, in our control flow videos, or when we write our for loop or while loop, what is the syntax for writing it? We write for I in, and then we pass on a list. Let's say we can pass a raw list like this, or sometime what we do is we construct a list first, my list, and then we construct a list like this, and we write up our for loop like in my list, and then whatever operation with indentation, whatever we have to do, we used to write this, right? Now friends, if we are doing this for loop, then we are passing a list, okay, whether in the raw list type or this. Sometime what we do is we pass range also for I in range 10, right? You may have seen this also. What is happening is, if we have to read it for I in range 10, for I in this list, so this I is going to take the value of 1, I is going to assume the value, next iteration it will going to assume the value of 2, in the next iteration I is going to assume the value of 3. So 1, 2, 3 or my list or this range 10, everything is something which is getting iterated over, which is getting looped over. And that's why these type of objects or data types in Python are known as iterators or iterable objects. Iterators or iterable objects. Okay. Now let me give you some examples, and before we go ahead and go into the IPython notebook, Jupyter notebook. So what are those objects, right? So we have list, this is an iterable object. We have dicts, we have sets, we have tuples, range, and we also have strings. Now these are our common iterators or iterable type objects, which is by default given by Python. We can construct our own, which is little advanced. Probably I will try to deal that, how we can construct a data type on an iterator type data type on our custom data type on our own, right? But friends, now one question which would come to your mind is, why int, float, bool, these type of data types are not an iterable objects? So one common and intuitive way to understand this is, if you see all these are which type of data types? These are container types. Why container types? Because these host multiple values. And these, what are these types? These are scalar types. Why scalar types? Because these hold only one value. If there is an int data type, it will only hold an integer value, one integer value. But if we have a list, it can hold multiple values. So friends, for iterating or for looping over, definitely one thing is very obvious, is that you need multiple values to loop over, right? Let me go over. If I write something like, over here there are multiple values to loop over. If suppose I have to write something like that, I is equal to 4 for I in, not sorry, like x is equal to 4 for I in X. If I have to write, will it even make sense? It will not, because X is a scalar type object. It is only handling or storing or containing one value, not multiple values. So iterating over or looping over doesn't even make sense, right? So again, to rephrase or to reiterate, our container type objects are generally iterable or iterator type objects, right? List, dict, sets, tuples, range, and strings. Or scalar type objects like int, float, and bool, they are not iterable objects. Now there are certain other features which are associated with iterators, which we'll going to just take a look in our Jupyter notebook. So let's head on to our Jupyter notebook over here. Yeah, this is our Jupyter notebook. So let me explain what I was talking about and see how it works. For I in 1, 2, 3, and let's say I have to do, I'm printing the value of their square roots, right? This is what I'm going to do. So it printed 149. Now I is going to assume the value of 1. I is going to assume in the next iteration 2. I is going to assume the value of 3 over here. And and I'm squaring it by, I'm squaring it, right? So 1 square is 1, 2 square is 4, 3 square is 9. This is how a simple for loop works, right? So this is a variable, this is an iterator, and I am doing that, okay? Now this is a concept, simple concept of having iterator, right? Now in case of range also, I told you that range is also an iterator. So let's see, for I in range 3, print I, and again I'm doing the square of it, right? So it will assume the value of 0, 1, 2, and the square of 0, 1, 2 is 0, 1, 4, right? Okay. Now let's see a few other things about iterators, which are, so iterators, if we have to go into the technical definitions, there is a built-in function. There is a built-in function which is called iter. So any object or data type which has an iter function available to it will be an iterable object. This is the technical definition of what are the iterable objects, right? So let's see. Now, if I have to define, let's say, my list, okay? My list will be 1, 2, 3, okay? And now I will do an iter on my list. Let's see what happens. So when I did an iter on my list, it created an iterator object, right? It created a list iterator object, okay, on top of my list. So my list is an iterable type object that I can see. Let's see, I define a value I, okay, and let me do an iter on I, and let's see, it is giving me an error. Int object is not iterable. That means int object. So this is one of the way in which you can find what is an iterable object and what is not an iterable object. Okay. Now this iter function is little more deeper than just identifying which object is an iterator or not an iterator, right? It actually, when I ran iterator on iter method on my list, let me run it one more time and store it in a variable, my iter, and on my list. Let me do something over here. Okay, when I print a next method, next function call on my iter object, let's see what happens. Okay, I did a spelling mistake over here. Let me rerun this. Okay, so it fetched. What was my list? Let me print that again over here. My list was 3 elements, has 3 elements, 1, 2, and 3. What I did was, using iter method, I constructed an iterator object over here, which is my iter. When I did a next method on that, it printed the first value out of it. Let me print the next value also. So the next is the method which will sequentially print all the objects, all the elements in that particular iterator type object. Okay, so this was my iterator type object. It is printing when I ran the next first time, it printed 1. When I ran the next second time, it printed 2. When I ran the next third time, it will print 3. Okay, so if an object has a function which is iter and also it implements a next method, that type of object in Python will be an iterator object. Okay, that this is the more technical definition. The other way to identify is, now I have already friends talked about the dunder methods, right? Dunder methods. Now these are internal methods which are usually you will see with preceding with double underscore and ending with double underscore. And the way to see that is with a dir command. Let me do a dir on my iter object. Okay, my iter. Okay, so it exposes not just the methods. Okay, if you see over here, yeah. So there is a dunder method which is iter, right? Which is present over here, which means that my iter is a list and list is of an iterable type. Okay, is that clear? Okay, now let's see. Yeah, so that much for, I hope friends by now you understand that what is an iterator, how we can make use of an iterator, what are the different types of iterators. Okay, let me go back over here. Yeah, seeing there are various built-in iterators in Python, and the way to identify them is through an iter method or next method, or these are usually the container type objects like list, dict, sets, tuples, range, strings. The scalar types which holds only one value like int, float and boolean, they can't be iterable, right? Now let's see few more examples. We have seen enough examples from the list. Let's see little more examples from maybe we can see the tuple, right? So let's construct a tuple, my tuple, and let's do that with a parenthesis and a very simple 1, 2, 3. Okay, and for I in my tuple, again if I have to iterate it over, I will do a print I. Okay, let me do that, and it is printing. So tuple, we can prove that the tuple is also an iterable object, because if we pass a tuple in a for construct, then my I was going to iterate it over 1, 2, 3, and it was printing 1, 2, 3, right? Now let's see the in case of a string how it happens. I told that over here, if you see that strings are also a container type, right? Range is also a container type. We'll just see a quick example of that. Let's start with range. For I in range 10, and I'm going to print, let's say this time I'm going to print I and its power to square, right? And I'm going to print that. So if you see, then this proves that the range is also an iterator type object, and it is printing the power of 2 for all the elements in range 10. If I print range 10, what it gives, let me use the list constructor for this. So range 10 is an iterator which will give 0 to 9. Okay, and here we are printing the squares of each, right? Now let's see the similar. We also told that string is also a iterator type. Let's see an example of that. So my string, again over here, I'll do my string, and this is ml with ep. Okay, for I in, or for a character in my string, print character. Okay, see, it is printing. So it is taking a string also as a container type, where each of the individual characters is an element. Okay, so you can imagine it is printing one character at a time, right? And this makes sense. This makes perfect sense, because a string we can have the zero based indexing. If you friends, if you recall, strings can have a zero based indexing, right? So a string is a container data type, and hence it is an iterator as well, right? So let's see now dictionaries, now dicts. So let's construct a very simple dict with maybe my dict, and what I'm going to construct it as a name and age type. So my name will be Anand, first name, and will be the surname I will mention over here, and in the second maybe I can mention another name is Suresh, and the surname will be Sharma. Okay, so the first name, the key, and the last name is the value over here. And for key in my dict, I'm going to print the keys. Okay, so Anand and Suresh are getting printed as the key. So you can see that the dict is, y dict is also considered as a iterable or iterator type object, right? With this, friends, I will hold over here for the iterators. We'll just go ahead and next we'll learn about comprehensions and then generators. Okay, so let's jump on to comprehensions.